to a natural, brilliant state.
We're all here to move our Black communities forward.
We think our children have to have the best. It's all about discipline.
How are we going to discipline ourselves so that we're able to save, so that we're able to make good financial decisions?
Recognizing that there's a road ahead if you manage the road in front of you.
The decisions that you're going to be making today in your lives where it comes to money will affect you in the future.
Discipline is one of the things that we often learn, sometimes by our environment, or sometimes we're forced to do it, and sometimes we don't learn it at all.
Stores want to get us in and out and get our money, and that's it. It's a game, so you have to be really wise to the game.
Do you know what it costs to run your home on a monthly basis?
Land acknowledgement. As we gather together, we acknowledge the sacred land on which we reside. It has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, this gathering place is still the home of many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. We are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to strive to make right with all our relations. Last but certainly not least, we acknowledge the people of African descent who were brought here against their own will or in search of a safe place to live their lives and raise their children. Reconnaissance des terres. En nous rassemblant, nous reconnaissons la terre sacrée sur laquelle nous résidons. C'est un site d'activité humaine depuis 15 000 ans. Cette terre est le territoire des Premières Nations Huron-Wendat et Petun, les Scéniques et plus récemment les Mississaugas de la rivière Crédit. Le territoire était sujet de l'alliance de la ceinture Wampum plat avec cuillère, un accord entre la Confédération Iroquois et Confédération des Ojibwe et des nations alliées à partager et à prendre soin pacifiquement pour les ressources autour des Grands Lacs. Aujourd'hui, ce lieu de rassemblement est toujours le foyer de nombreux peuples autochtones de toute l'île de la Tortue et nous sommes reconnaissants d'avoir la possibilité de travailler dans la communauté sur ce territoire. Nous sommes également conscients des alliances brisées et de la nécessité de nous efforcer de guérir toutes nos relations. Dernier point, mais non le moindre, nous remercions les personnes d'ascendance africaine qui ont été amenées ici contre leur volonté ou à la recherche d'un endroit sûr où vivre leur vie et élever leurs enfants.
This webinar provides illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the Black Business and Professional Association. The BBPA makes no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to assume no responsibility for the content or application of the material contained herein, and especially disclaim all liability for any damages arising out of the use or reference to or lines on such material.
Good morning. Good Saturday morning to you and yours. It's a pleasure to be here. 2023, a new year. It's a new dawn, a new day. It's a new life for all of us here at the BBPA and for all of you. And at the BBPA, we definitely recognize our resolutions and making new plans and having new things on our horizons, but we don't wait for the new year to do that. We do that every single day. And every single day at the BBPA, we make Black history. We don't necessarily wait for February to come in and to make Black history. We make that every single day. And it's a pleasure to be here, to see you all. And as we always say, it's never too late to tell a friend, to join us here on Community Space, the financial literacy program that speaks the language of the community. And this morning, I'm seeing a lot of new new names. So please do tell a friend again to join us, but let us know where you're joining us from. We know we have people all across Canada, through the United States, and throughout the whole world joining us here on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please do put in the chat where you're joining us from. And throughout our presentation today, please do join us in conversations and ask as many questions as you can, because we have an amazing guest this morning. His name is Peter Gillo, and he is the CTO and co-founder of Development. It is an innovative, Peter is an innovative urban planner and advocates for entrepreneurship, wealth building, and philanthropy. He holds a master's degree from the University of Massachusetts and is passionate about using creativity in all aspects of life. Through his organization, which is a nonprofit organization, he's dedicated to creating programming that empowers the next generation of Black community to be visionaries and to develop the world differently. He works diligently changing the world, and he's an asset to our community. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to you this morning, Peter Gillo. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you, Roderick, for that wonderful introduction. I'm excited to really talk to you guys today about Black generational wealth, which is a component of what we do at Development. This is my second time speaking to BBPA about this topic, and I'm just glad that you guys reached out to us again and said, look, we need to bring this to community over and over again, because the more we reach, the more we teach, and the more we can make an impact on this world. So give me a moment. I want to share my screen with everyone, and then we're going to get started.
All right. So how's everything with you and yours?
Good. We're coming off the holiday season. I had a newborn, and I'm excited to really see what she brings to this world. My 4-year-old is really excited that she has a sibling now. So,
congratulations.
Dealing with that, which is awesome, and then just taking it easy, adjusting.
And we encourage all of you who are with us here in the Zoom room to have your little ones join in and listen, because that is the way that we learn. And when this information is available and accessible to our community, we definitely encourage you to have everyone to join in and listen, so that we can learn together and grow together. So please do tell a friend to tell a friend.
So thank you, Roderick, again. I know that you briefly touched on Development, so I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on Development. So Development is a trailblazing Black-led 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization that serves young Black people from around the world, with a focus on college students and recent graduates who aim to positively impact the Black community, but lack the resources and support necessary to do so. We aim to play a key role in driving the creation of sustainable Black personal, generational, communal wealth. We accomplish this by empowering the next generation of Black visionary leaders to prioritize historically centered and globally conscious, community-minded entrepreneurship and philanthropy. Through our commitment to re-empower the global Black community through historically centered re-education that empowers aspiring Black visionaries to develop their world differently, we sustainably solve deep-seated historical knowledge and wealth gap issues caused by centuries of global Black economic oppression. We currently fulfill our mission through 3 programs, well, actually 2. Our workshop-based Black generational wealth program, which I'm giving you a portion of today, and our consultpreneurship program, which is a 10-week summer internship program for Black college students. All offer beneficiaries some form of analytic, community-minded business concepts, rock solid, easy to follow roadmaps for personal development and financial security, and lifelong access to practical resources and a community of Black business mentors. To learn more about all of our other programs, please visit our website, development.org. If you, Victoria, if you can, you can put that in the chat group. It's DIFFVELOPMENT.org, and you can see all of our wonderful programs there. And if you're on social media, I ask that you guys to really follow us on social media, see what we're doing, see how you can get involved with what we do. So I'm here today to make you aware of some core challenges that impact Black professionals like yourselves, so that you can navigate the world from an informed perspective. Unfortunately, traditional curriculums do not prepare Black professionals like ourselves for the racially specific challenges we might encounter after graduating from college or high school, where you may not have much access to financial support or other important resources. So statistics consistently show that Black professionals are at a disadvantage when it comes to obtaining employment, causing them to be disproportionately unemployed and underemployed, perpetuating the Black-white wealth gap. And I'll talk about unemployment and underemployment in another session. I'm scheduled to present to you guys for the next 3 weeks. So I ask that you guys join us next week and the week after. So my question is, what is the Black-white wealth gap? Can anybody answer that question? And I guess Roderick, somebody can monitor the group and call on someone to answer that question.
Absolutely. And while we're having that question answered, just Peter, I just had a little quick question for you.
Okay.
So what prompted you to get into this? Because obviously it's so important to educate our own community and to have nuanced learning. But what was the catalyst to have you get into this sector?
Great question. So as you already previously stated, my background is in urban planning. So I was fortunate enough to get a job directly out of college, where I worked on a study called the Black Life Study. We looked at institutionalized racism and its effect on African American health. But it was government funding, and that funding ran out. So at that point, I found myself in a position looking for another job, right? And in that space where I'm looking for another job, I realized how hard it was to find another job, especially as a Black person. So I said, you know what, it's been 2 months, 3 months, and then my wife is telling me like, it's really hard. I've been telling you it's really hard. And she has her own story where she graduated from a top tier university and she couldn't get a job, and at that point she had to temp and then she was eventually hired. But this concept or this notion of really understanding the struggle in which we Black people more specifically have to face once we get these degrees and we enter into the real world, understanding those realities, and then we got into the research, really looking into the research, understanding it and saying like, this is real. And this is why these things are happening, especially to Black people. And we really wanted to understand the foundation of this wealth gap and understanding how to build Black generational wealth. When we said that foundation really zeroes in on the socioeconomic status of every Black person around the world. So we said, you know what, let's look into literacy, financial literacy, and let's look into entrepreneurship literacy that we can really make an impact on the next generation, building Black visionary leaders, using that history that is not told to our history, Black history, that is not told to us in this unique way. So that's why we created our programming, and that's why we developed development,
All right.
So development is DIFF is diff, but it's a stand-in for differently, so developing differently.
Yes.
So we put it together, and that's why you got development.
All right. Yeah, great concept.
Yeah. So anybody, I can't see the chat group, so you can read it to me if someone answered what is the Black-white wealth gap. I can't really.
We haven't got anybody yet.
Okay.
People, don't be shy, don't be bashful. And also, if you wanted just to come on and share your answers with Peter and the rest of the group, please do so and just put up your hand and we will have you come on and share your contribution.
It's perfectly fine. I spoke to shy groups as well. I think that they'll eventually warm up. So I'll just move on.
Okay.
So the Black-white wealth gap is a historical global issue that is the direct result of the exploitation that took place during the twin institutions of slavery and colonialism, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, where Black people were literally taken out of the wealth building equation. Although these institutions ended, legacies of economic inequality prevail. For the purposes of time, we cannot go over all the manifestations of the Black-white wealth gap, so we'll focus on North America. To learn more about how this is a global issue, get a copy of our book, Understanding How to Build Black Generational Wealth. So in Canada and the US, the Black-white wealth gap is illustrated by Black people only having a fraction of the wealth that whites have, leaving us much less prepared for an emergency with fewer resources to invest in our future, such as moving into a good neighborhood, investing in our future, like sending our kids off to college, etc. Thus, when Black people graduate and cannot find a job and they have to settle for something that does not pay well, which is a form of underemployment, which I'll cover in another session, this sets us back tremendously, especially since the average Black family does not have enough generational wealth to help recent graduates through hard times. More specifically, the average Black family does not have enough disposable cash necessary to help Black graduates pay for things like their rent, credit card bills, or student loans. That's why we're here today. We believe in creating a space where Black professionals like yourselves can openly explore the topic of Black generational wealth and what it means to you, where you will be more conscious about making wealth building decisions sooner in life, putting you in a position to break down barriers and overcome familial and societal limitations. So with that being said, welcome to the abbreviated part 1 of the Black Generational Wealth Program, Black Disparity and How to Overcome It. During session 1, I'll go over the economic realities future Black wealth builders face, defining generational wealth, and then we'll go over your wealth status and then how to build generational wealth. We will then continue this program over the course of the next 2 Saturdays, as I mentioned to you earlier. So we urge that you come back for next week, session 2, the employment realities, future Black wealth builder space, and generational and communal wealth creation through Afropreneurship and Afro-philanthropy. Session 3, I'll definitely tap into developing your community-minded business concept, really delving into entrepreneurship. And I have a business concept form that hopefully you guys, if you participate, you fill out, and I can just go over those things. So today we'll dig deep into your personal and statistical analysis, and we'll make you aware of the Black household disparities, essentially, where you are on the spectrum of building Black generational wealth and the steps involved in building it. By being challenged to examine your socioeconomic status, as I mentioned to you earlier, your socioeconomic status, we feel as though that is the foundation of everything in relation to the wealth building process. You'll walk away from this presentation more confident about initiating your wealth building process through intentional financial planning. So we begin with the economic realities future Black wealth builders face, more specifically in relation to the economic status of Black professionals like yourselves. As with almost everything in life, building your wealth is about your mindset. Thus, look at this moment as the beginning or the amplification of your wealth building journey. In order to cultivate the correct mindset, it is very important for you to be aware of the external forces impacting your internal process. For professionals, as professionals, the main external force you need to be aware of is your socioeconomic status, the socioeconomic status you were born into, and how it has impacted your financial life thus far. Begin the process by asking yourself a few questions, such as what financial situation did I grow up in? How much financial support am I receiving from my guardians? How much financial responsibility do I have compared to my peers? In order to understand your socioeconomic status, you must first understand the broad socioeconomic realities impacting Black people as a whole, and then dig into your personal and specific situation. Doing so will make you an informed wealth builder who is aware of the societal challenges impacting you as a Black person, as well as the more personal challenge you face as a result of your family's particular situation, preparing you to be more intentional about making decisions to help you overcome such barriers. So overall, research indicates that the majority of Black professionals come from low-income families where there's little to no generational wealth. More specifically, in Canada, Black households in Canada are almost twice as likely as white Canadians to have trouble putting food on the table due to the lack of money, regardless of home ownership status, income, education level, or household makeup. Before adjusting for income, education, and other factors, just 10% of white households are food insecure, while more than 28% of Black households are food insecure. While just over 12% of white children are food insecure, almost 34% of Black children, that's 1 in 3, are food insecure in Canada. So with this in mind, let's take a look at the U.S., where like Canada, there's a major disparity problem when it comes to wealth. So in the US, Black professionals suffer from a lack of access to generational wealth and startup funding to kickstart their futures. For instance, white families are 5 times more likely than Black families to receive large gifts or inheritances, which can be used to pay for college. And when Black families do pass on inheritances, the wealth they pass on is usually 10 times less than what white families pass on. Regardless of educational background, the typical Black family with head of household who's working full-time has less wealth than the typical white family who head of household is unemployed. So that's very alarming. When we look at white millennials, they're more likely to receive monetary assistance in the form of formal gifts like inheritances and informal gifts like their parents paying for their rent, loans, or phone bill. Meanwhile, Black millennials who have less accumulated wealth are more likely to share their savings with their family members, diminishing even further their already limited amassed wealth. Thus, it's not surprising that the Kauffman Foundation finds that one of the main reasons why Blacks are unable to save as adults is because they give financial support to close family. In fact, studies have found that 80% of Black parents expect to be supported by their children, and that's something that we need to think about, like if wealth is supposed to be moving forward, why are we asking the next generation to give back, So with that being said, my question to you all is, how do you define generational wealth? I want to take a moment for, if someone isn't shy, and if they want to put it in a chat group, how they would define the generational wealth, I would love it. If not, then I'll move on. But Roderick, you can let me know if someone puts something in a chat group. I'll give it about I want to say about 30 seconds. And then I'll just move on if someone puts something in a chat group defining generational wealth.
All right, so this is your chance, folks. And I've seen a couple people that I know on here who definitely have insight on what that generational wealth is within our community. And I just wanted to comment briefly, Peter, in terms of, well, I don't want to give away the answer, but in terms of the disparity that exists between Black families and Black community and white communities, in the sense that within the last 160 years, which is technically less than 3 generations, we were just released out of bondage, quote unquote. Hence the huge disparity between our community as an African or of African descent and of the Eurocentric communities, right? Which obviously were there to, make their fortunes off of our backs, literally across the whole world, right? And so I mean, we're starting literally, as they say, we've started from the bottom, and it's just now within these last probably 2 generations that we've started to see the come up of our communities in terms of just being released from some of the mental and emotional bondage that we still often carry unknowingly. So
absolutely,
bearing in mind with all the things that we've had to go through and being subjected to, we're doing well. But we do have some information here in the chat. Thank you very much, folks, for contributing to the chat. And so in terms of the definition of generational wealth, the transfer of inheritance of money, and that came from our friend Bishop Ransford Jones. Good morning, Ransford. And also money or monetary means passed on continually over generations. And thank you very much, Miss Thompson. And Beverly said, wealth passed down from one generation to another in different ways, i.e. assets. And again, thank you very much for that comment. And also we have year-over-year transfer of wealth between generations, and that includes real estate, business, and financial assets. So absolutely great commentary from Carrie Ann on that one. Thank you very much. And I think from my perspective, they're dead on the money.
Yeah, they are. So thank you for sharing. So yes, you guys are dead on the money. Generational wealth is also called family wealth or multi-generational wealth, or legacy wealth, is conceptualized in a number of ways. For example, for some of it refers to the passing down of traditions and heirlooms, or even biology or good genes. However, the generational wealth we're discussing today, which is exactly what you stated, and the generational wealth most people talk about, which you just stated, refers to financial wealth that can be passed down to the next generation. So now we're going to take a moment to watch a brief clip from the documentary Generation One: The Search for Black Wealth in the US, where you'll get a broader sense of the many ways generational wealth is defined. And when you hear this information can be used anywhere, and it relates directly to Black people. So I'll play that clip and then we'll have a discussion after. And let me know if you guys can hear it.
Wealth is partially accumulated, but partially also inherited. So accumulation of wealth is often a function of being able to live beneath your means. But if you cannot live beneath your means because you're on the poverty periphery, and we have more poverty, of course, in the African American community, then your wealth building possibilities are basically tampered down. Then when you talk about accumulated wealth, you're talking about what you inherited. And again, if you have not had opportunities, or your foremothers and fathers have not had opportunities to accumulate, you have less of that. Even the best of us, the most talented, the most educated, report that they experience, even minor, economic discrimination. So when you look at labor markets and you look at, some of the folks, you've got a Black president, like that matters. I mean, it matters at some level, psychic, but it doesn't matter at the level of which you talk about the terms and conditions of economic activity. You've got African American CEOs, but they're just a fraction, a minor fraction. If you've got 500, Fortune 500, what are we looking at? 2% of them as African American people. So despite the surface equality, when you tamp it down, you see a lot less of that.
I think generational wealth in the African American community is almost non-existent. I think that there are many other nationalities and many other races that are doing an excellent job with that. But we have been handicapped in many ways, psychologically, but then also educationally in terms of how to build that wealth.
We have been consumed with materialism and just storing up possessions, but not really assets. So we're all about getting the cars and looking like we have the house and looking like we have the right clothes, but we're not really investing in the things that create generational wealth, such as owning our own businesses or owning our own homes, owning the land, property, those type of things, real investment vehicles. We're just not focused on that.
To me, what it means is leaving something for your kids, leaving something such that when you are dead and buried, people benefit from the fact that you were here. You don't leave liabilities to your children, you're leaving assets to your children. You are allowing your family to progress as a result of the hard work you put in, as opposed to helping them get further and further behind. So an example might be when you die and they hold your funeral, did you leave your child some stocks, bonds, and assets, or did you leave them a bunch of bills, a bunch of bill collectors, and funeral expenses that they can't pay? You see a lot of people that scramble just to pay for the funeral of somebody who died because that person didn't take the time to even get life insurance. So that's what I see generational wealth as being.
Generational wealth is nothing new. It's in the Bible. Christ commands us to take possession of the land, own the land, So that's generational wealth. And we have to first understand what that is before we can even create a wealth plan and say, oh, well, I want to leave inheritance. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children's children. Before we can even repeat that, we have to know what goes into that. What are the foundations of building wealth? A lot of people run around and say, hey, we're going to have a wealth seminar, and they're talking about MLMs, and I'm not taking a shot at multi-level marketing, organizations, but that's not a wealth building plan that's going to sustain for the next 100 years. That's not going to happen. There's cornerstones to wealth. And black folks don't even know what those cornerstones are. There's 6 wealth building foundational blocks that have to be in a portfolio in order for that portfolio to be balanced and diversified. Doesn't include an MLM. It includes businesses. It includes real estate. It includes precious metals, rhodium, platinum, palladium, gold, silver. It includes annuities. It includes equities. It includes the foreign currency exchange. Negroes don't even understand half of those terms that I'm just giving about. Or if they do, they're not putting those terms inside a portfolio to ensure growth over the next 100 years. Negroes can't plan past the 1st and the 15th. That's a challenge. We have to address those challenges. We have to have technical assistance. We have to have conferences. We have to have actual experts. We have to write books. We have to focus our energies and everything that we have on this subject matter. Otherwise, we're going to be relegated to the lowest common denominator in the next 10 years.
To me, generational wealth basically means that you store up enough material possessions and assets in order to leave them to your children and your children's children. So I believe that the real purpose of wealth is so that you could leave a legacy for your family, for those that come after you. And really so that everyone doesn't have to keep starting over from scratch. When you work so hard, I mean, who's working this hard only to just leave and the thought of leaving your children behind in a worse place than when they got here. You know, they got here, you know, at zero. But when we don't create systems and put things in place for wealth building and wealth creation, then we may leave them with debt. So they're worse off after we've been here working for 70 and 80 years. It's just not right. It's not fair to them. I don't think it's fair to your children to have to, you know, have a bake sale or a car wash to bury you. I don't think it's fair.
Generational wealth is wealth that passes from generation to generation. So you're not just looking at someone's current position, you're looking at what they inherited. And what we know is that African American people, by and large, inherit very little. Because by and large, generationally, African American people have earned less, and in some cases, spent more. But I underscore the earn less as opposed to spend more. In order to achieve an equivalent lifestyle, African Americans often spend more. Let's use housing as an example. How do you get your home? For many whites, your parents offer you a down payment, help you out with it. For many African Americans, that's just not there. How do you pay for your education? For many whites, their education is paid for. For most African Americans, people are going into debt and doing other things. So if you graduate with no debt, as opposed to graduating with $50,000 worth of debt, your initial life chances are very different. So those are the kinds of things that impact generational wealth. So if the average graduating debt is $26,000, but half of all young people graduate with no debt, we're talking about a higher debt for those who graduate with debt. We know that African American young people are more likely to graduate with debt, so you're looking at a larger sum of debt, which means that you graduate with a shackle of $40,000 as opposed to no shackle. Many of our young people go to community colleges as opposed to four-year schools for debt reasons. Nothing wrong with community colleges, except for when they don't have pipelines. From a 2-year to a 4-year, oftentimes young people are disadvantaged. The issue of generational wealth is what you pass on to your children or to your younger descendants, your nieces, your nephews, and others. Fewer African Americans than whites have that to tap into. So you can look at first generation or even second generation wealth and say, okay, but then you can look at multi-generational wealth and say there is always going to be an inequality unless there are ways to infuse wealth into the African American community.
I read a description of how wealthy people think, and I thought it just crystallized these attitudes and behaviors. And so I like to share this because I think it's a really simple way of understanding the difference between working class people and wealthy people. And so this is how I like to describe it. Poverty-minded people think and manage their finances day to day. Poor people think and manage their finances week to week. Middle-class people manage their finances and think month to month. I mean, think about it. You even buy a home, a mortgage payment. Can you afford it? Month to month. A car payment. Can you afford it? Rich people manage their money year to year. They're already planning for the future and allocating how much is going to go into investments. Affluent people manage their money decade to decade, and wealthy people manage their finances generation to generation. So when you really think about what's the difference between a poverty-minded person and a wealthy person, and it's the ability to make decisions long term. So to be truly wealthy, you've got to be thinking about the decisions that you make today and how they're going to impact the next generation. Wealthy people think, act, and manage their finances differently. You know, these habits and behaviors, they're really not difficult to adopt, but they're not difficult. So the way I like to put it, it's not hard, but it ain't easy. Really, you have to almost do the opposite of what all your peers are doing because they're managing their money the wrong way too.
So with that being said, you know, as you can see, the issue of Black generational wealth is extremely important to discuss due to the fact that the Black-white wealth gap is perpetuated by a cycle of little to no intergenerational wealth being transferred from Black parents to their children. So I just want to, you know, and I'll take one comment, you know, like I love this video. I love especially the ending of it, really the breakdown of the mindset, which it truly takes to become a wealth builder, or really looking at the concept of Black generational wealth or generational wealth in general, and how you should be thinking once you reach that stage, you know. So with that being said, now we're going to take a look at your socioeconomic status in relation to the wealth building process by having each of you fill out Development's wealth status survey via development.org/survey. And I'll put that in the chat group. I during the break, I found a way. Okay, awesome.
There we go.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you. So take a moment to visit that website, fill out the survey. It shouldn't take you that long. I want to say it's about like less than a minute. So I'll give you like a minute and a half to fill out that survey, and then I'll walk you through the survey and your understanding of what the survey means to you. Depending on your device, if you're on your cell phone or if you're on like a tablet or something like that, you may have to scroll down to see the survey. Please let me know if you're having issues accessing the survey. So I'll give you a moment to do that, and then I'll just move on to the breakdown. Okay. So Roderick, I don't know if you have any questions.
You know, I'm actually just doing a survey with everybody else right now too. But
awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
you know, I found that video very powerful, and you know, I think it just goes to support what we were saying initially, that you know, so many of our communities have been subjected to poverty just based on the dynamics in which, you know, North America or the Caribbean or certain parts of South America and Europe were founded just on our backs. And we haven't had an opportunity, the majority of us, to create that generational wealth based on our just having to put food on the table in several circumstances. And, you know, the lack of access to capital or anything else that will help us to be able to hand down, you know, anything substantial to our children. And obviously, even in terms of, you know, the institution of slavery, you know, bearing us from education, and obviously having an impact on our family dynamics, in the sense that we weren't being able to, you know, to be married. And there were so many things that just contributed to where we are here and now. And, obviously, a lot of people will say, hey, that happened 160 years ago. Let's just move on. But obviously, we've had, 460 years of learning this,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely,
And even
absolutely.
though we may not be in the shackles, but again, just in terms of the survival mode that a lot of us are in, as opposed to the thrival mode,
Yeah.
it takes time to transition, and obviously this is not readily available in most schools unless you
Yeah.
get to that post-secondary
Sure.
education. And I guess it all depends on where you go that you'll get this certain information, because obviously it is a little hidden secret that nobody wants to talk about, just based on the criminality that's associated with it, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
there's always an explanation for phenomenon from my perspective.
Absolutely. And going back to your point, it's just and I talked to Stephanie about this generational trauma, but actually going back to really, it's a learned behavior. So how do we unlearn it? And that, that's the reason why we have to create our own curriculums and speak from our own perspective, which is what we try to do at Development, really speak from the Black perspective, using our history, understanding our mistakes, our flaws, whether right or wrong. Like when you look at the world that we live in a capitalistic society, and that's our reality. But how do we get here? How do we get to this state, and looking at things objectively so we can actually move forward and kind of like work on the trauma that has been ingrained in us, but really looking at the reality and gaining all of the facts so we can actually move forward in a positive way, instead of like harping on all this negativity that has happened to us. So, that's another conversation. I'm going to move on and really break down each of your score. So if you haven't finished the survey, please finish up. So I'm going to go through the survey now. So survey question 1 through 5 assess your level of financial support you have at home. These questions define your socioeconomic status you were born into. Collectively, these questions are based on a 0 to 5 point scale. For every yes response, you gain 1 point, right? The closer you are to 5, the less financial support you have at home, and the lower your socioeconomic status. Survey question 6, assess your debt status, and it's based on a 0 to 5 point scale. If your debt was between $0 and $999, you receive 0 points, because that debt can be easily paid off with any job. If your debt was between $1,000 and $14,999, you receive 1 point. If your debt was between $15,000 and $29,999, you receive 2 points, and so on and so forth. So essentially, the higher the amount of debt you're in, the more points you gain. Survey question 7, assess your current level of financial responsibility, and it's based on a 0 to 15 point scale. Your 1st through 5th responses weighed higher than your 6th through 10th responses, since items 1 through 5 generally cost more than $250 per month, and items 6 through 10 generally cost less than $250 per month. This brings us to the score you received at the end of your survey. Hopefully you wrote it down. I forgot to mention that. Your score represents the stage you fall within when it comes to initiating the wealth building process. Okay? So now I'm going to break down the wealth building process. But before we begin breaking down each score range, there are 2 terms that I want to review, since they'll be used repeatedly as we define each stage. Those terms are net worth and debt to wealth ratio. I didn't define them before. I was supposed to, but I didn't. But at this point, I'm going to define debt to wealth ratio and net worth. So net worth is everything you own in significance, your assets minus what you owe, your debts, which are your liabilities. Then there's debt to wealth ratio, which we have defined as the measure that informs you of where you are on the spectrum of building generational wealth. More specifically, it divides your debt by your wealth, providing with a number that is either less than, more than, or equal to 1. With a ratio greater than 1 indicates that you have more debt than wealth, and you have some undebting to do before you can begin building generational wealth. A ratio around 1 indicates that your debt is relatively equal to your wealth, meaning that you could easily fall back into debt as easily as you could begin building wealth. And lastly, a ratio below 1 indicates that you have more wealth than debt, and you are in a position to actively build an abundance of valuable possessions or capital that can be translated into generational wealth. For the purposes of this presentation, wealth represents assets you possess no matter how small. It can be money you've saved over the years, even from summer jobs, or even, like from that part-time job you have, or assets you have or will have access through inheritances, such as real estate, businesses, trusts, or even more notable items such as valuable artwork, furniture, etc. Usually wealth is used to describe the abundance of valuable possessions or money, but we like to use this to describe any assets you are in possession of that can be leveraged into more assets. Because if you think of assets in those terms, you're more likely to recognize the importance of treating all of your assets with care. Thus, to circle back to your survey score, your score makes you aware of not only your net worth and your debt to wealth ratio, but also the fact that while wealth you anticipate having when you graduate directly correlates with the level of generational wealth you were born into, it does not mean that your wealth has to stay where it began. With the right mindset, as someone stated earlier, and discipline, you can build substantial wealth that can be passed down to the next generation. Equally, if you're born into some level of wealth and currently do not have any foreseeable financial challenges, as with everything in life, that too can change. The reality is, regardless of where you stand now, you can easily move in and out of every wealth building stage, as where you end up directly correlates with the decisions you make. We therefore encourage you to pay attention to each stage, regardless of where you currently stand, as one tells you something different from the other wealth building process. For those who receive a score of 81 to 100%, you are in what we call the undebting stage. As an undebtor, your level of financial responsibility is extremely high, and is highly likely that it outweighs the amount of financial support you receive from home. This means that your net worth is negative, meaning your debt to wealth ratio is significantly higher than 1, and you are at risk for being very financially unstable when you graduate or are living in the real world. Thus, if you fall within the undebting stage and you were to subtract your liabilities from your assets, you will receive a negative number. In order to get to the next stage of the wealth building process, which is saving, you will need to focus on building financial stability for yourself by paying off your debt until your debt to wealth ratio is slightly more than 1 rather than significantly more than 1, which is where you are right now. So the next stage is the saving stage. For those of you who received a score of 61 to 80%. If you're in the saving stage, your level of financial responsibility is high, but it's not extremely high. And it most likely outweighs the amount of financial support you receive from home. This means that though your net worth is negative, your debt to wealth ratio is slightly higher than 1, rather than significantly higher than 1, making your risk level for being financially unstable after college slightly better than those in the undebting stage. This means that you have access to slightly more assets than those who are in the undebting stage, allowing you to put money to the side towards wealth building. Thus, those of you who are in the saving stage should focus on building financial stability by paying off your debt and taking steps towards building wealth by saving. This means that, as with the undebting stage, you will need to sacrifice and be disciplined, but this time in order to pay off debt and generate savings. Giving up unnecessary expenses and training yourself to spend less will leave you with more money every month to not only consistently pay off your debt, but also consistently save. This will require you to formulate and stick to a debt elimination and savings plans that are structured by automated payment and saving schedules. Following the saving stage is the growing stage for those of you who received a score of 41 to 60%. Those of you who are in the growing stage, your level of financial responsibility is moderate, and it may or may not outweigh the amount of financial support you receive from home. This means that your net worth is around 0 and your debt to wealth ratio is around 1. This also means that you are at risk for being relatively financially unstable when you graduate or are living in the real world, but are in a strong position to build financial stability by not only paying off your debt and saving, but also investing your savings to generate long-term financial growth. You can invest in different assets such as businesses, real estate, stocks, bonds, etc. Now, I'm just going to define what a stock is due to time. is usually an engaging moment, but I believe that most of you know what a stock is. So a stock, so I'm just going to define it. A stock is known as a share or equity, is a type of financial asset that signifies ownership in a corporation and represents a claim on part of the corporation's assets and earnings. You can invest in stocks across every industry, as I'm sure that you're aware. Most companies that you can purchase stock from, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, are all of the household items we use, which include like the Apple phone that you're using, Facebook, Alibaba, which is a site where people go in and find items that they can sell on Amazon, and of course, Amazon. Now, a bond, unlike stocks, bonds don't give you ownership rights. They represent a loan from you, the buyer, to the issuer of the bond. When you purchase a bond, you receive interest payments during the bond's term at the bond's stated interest rate. When the bond matures, meaning the terms of the bond expires, the company pays back the bondholder the bond's face value. Bonds are issued by companies or governments. For example, when a municipality, such as a city, a county, or a town or a village, needs to build new roads or a hospital, they issue bonds to finance the project. Corporations usually issue bonds to raise money or capital expenditures, operations, and acquisitions. Thus, as you can see, if you're in a growing stage, you need to sacrifice even more and be even more disciplined in order to successfully pay off your debt, generate savings, and invest at the same time. Giving up unnecessary expenses and training yourself to spend less will give you more money every month to not only consistently pay off your debt and save, but also consistently make new investments. This will require you to formulate and stick to an automated debt elimination plan and take your savings to the next level by investing a portion of it into an investment portfolio that includes all of your investments you fully vetted and feel comfortable taking the risk with. Investing, I want to be very clear, is a risk, So it's up to you to do the research, do the due diligence on your own end and say, this is a worthwhile risk that I want to take on my money to increase my wealth. So we're making you aware of that. So for those of you who received a score of 21 to 40%, this is the securing wealth stage. If you're in the securing wealth stage, your level of financial responsibility is low, and it most likely does not outweigh the amount of financial support you receive from home. This means that your net worth is positive and your debt to wealth ratio is slightly less than 1. You are therefore well positioned to be financially stable when you graduate or are living in the real world, and thus should focus on solidifying that stability for yourself and future generations by not only paying off your debt, saving, and investing a portion of your savings to generate long-term financial growth, but also documenting your legacy by working with a professional to have your finances managed from generation to generation. This should include putting together a valid last will and testament, purchasing life insurance, and could include trust funds and estate plans. So I want to take a moment to just really break down those 4 categories. So a last will and testament is a legal document that communicates a person's final wishes pertaining to possessions and dependents. A person's last will and testament outlines what to do with possessions, whether the deceased will leave them to another person, a group, or donate them to charity, and what happens to other things he or she is responsible for, such as custody of dependents and management of accounts and interests. So we want to stress to you how important a last will and testament is in planning for generational wealth. A life insurance. Life insurance is a contract between an insurer and a policyholder in which the insurer guarantees payment of death benefit to named beneficiaries upon the death of the insured. The purpose of life insurance is to provide financial protection to surviving dependents after the death of an insured. So if you don't have life insurance, we urge that you get it. It is a stepping stone, especially with building generational wealth. It's a small stepping stone, and if you have it, you can definitely secure a little bit for the next generation. Now, trust fund. A trust fund is set up by a person known as a grantor for the benefit of another person known as a beneficiary. A trust fund can contain cash, investments, real estate, and other assets, and can be a valuable tool in estate planning and in ensuring the financial security of a child or grandchild. Trusts are managed by a trustee, which is the person or organization responsible for administering the trust as it was intended. And I want to stress as it was intended. So people always ask me this question: what is a trust fund like? There are many different categories of a trust fund, and I won't get into that, but the overall layman's understanding of what a trust fund is look at it like this. Say if you passed away, right? And you want to manage your wealth that you build for the next generation, even in death, right? So that administrator will say, let's say in that trust fund, you said like, my grandkid has to get a master's degree to get $100,000, right? If that grandchild does not get a master's degree, then it will go to their grandchild, you know? So you can manage the money and your assets even in death with the trust fund. And lastly, an estate plan. An estate plan comprehensively documents the transfer of assets from an individual to or family to select beneficiaries in anticipation of death. An estate plan includes one's last will and testament, and an extensive detail regarding how one's total property, real and personal, will be distributed to one's heirs. Real property is real estate. Personal property includes everything else, such as cars, household items, and bank accounts. An estate plan aims to preserve the maximum amount of wealth possible for the intended beneficiaries and the flexibility for the individual prior to death. The comprehensive nature of an estate plan makes it easier for a person to state his or her intentions clearly, preventing family members from fighting each other for assets after the estate owner has passed away. So hopefully you got a better understanding of those four categories. And lastly, for those of you who received a score of 0 to 20%, this is what we call the wealth building stage. And this is the stage that everyone should aspire to. If you're in the wealth building stage, your level of financial responsibility is extremely low, and it is highly likely that it does not outweigh the amount of financial support you receive from home. This means that your net worth is positive and your debt to wealth ratio is significantly less than 1. You are therefore well positioned to be financially stable when you are in the real world. At this stage in a wealth building game, you should consistently reevaluate, re-implement, and repeat the cycle of fostering financial stability for yourself and future generations by continuously paying off your debt, saving, investing a large portion of your savings to generate long-term financial growth, and documenting your legacy by working with a professional to have your finances managed from generation to generation, following the same steps listed in the undebting, saving, growing, and securing wealth stages. And I just want to note this: even if you're a millionaire, you can be in the undebting stage. You know, we always have this notion that you're a millionaire, then you have wealth. No, you don't. A millionaire could be in debt, and it can be very well in the undebting stage. You know, so this is not only for the person that only has $15 in their bank account. This is the person that has $1 million in their bank account. And as I mentioned to you before, you can fall in any category throughout your life. So with that being said, as you can see, successfully building generational wealth begins with undebting. That is getting yourself out of debt and living a life that keeps you out of debt. Once you master undebting, you can begin making investments to acquire assets that can be passed down to the next generation or from generation to generation. So now we're going to take a moment to look at a brief clip from the same documentary that I played earlier. But this time it's focused on how you can build generational wealth.
The first step people should take when it comes to building intergenerational wealth would be one, save more than you spend. Don't think like a consumer anymore, or at least not a pure consumer. Building that emergency fund of savings is what every financial advisor tells you should be your first step. Number two, diversify your income streams. Find a quote-unquote side hustle or something that allows you to have money coming from multiple sources, because You really don't have job security if you've only got one job. Economic security is as important as economic prosperity. And a lot of us do not have economic security. Many of us are living paycheck to paycheck. Next, understand that wealth is not just financial. If you can also pass on wealth through knowledge and information, for example, among other things. So make sure that your kids understand the things that you may not understand. Make sure your kids are positioned to live out some of the dreams that maybe you passed up on when you were a child. So, for example, if there's an entrepreneurship camp or something where your child can learn how to create their own business, send them to that camp. Or teach them the basics of financial literacy at an early age so they don't mess up their credit or they don't overspend their money. Because remember, you don't have to leave your children money to leave them something valuable. Now, in terms of leaving them money, I would think in terms of ownership. I'm a big believer in ownership. Everybody has to own something. It's hard to be independent if you don't own the land on which you stand. So by diversifying your income streams, obtaining the ownership of something, that allows you the opportunity to leave your kids something. The final thing I would make sure I did is make sure that you have everything in place so that when you pass, your children will be better off than they were when you were here, rather as opposed to worse off. That means your funeral should be paid for. All the medical bills and the creditors should be dealt with in some way that's not going to be passed on to people after you're gone. I think if you do that would be a good first few steps to take to leave something for your kids to be satisfied with.
So as you can see, the ultimate goal is to reach the building wealth stage, where you're in a position to actively grow your legacy. But after seeing this video and after going through the stages of wealth building, what has this made you think about in terms of the generational wealth you were born into versus the generational wealth you would like to build? And I would like for you guys to just put that in the chat group. I'm going to move on, but I just want you to think about that. And I'll repeat the question. I want you to really type in the chat group what this video and what you just learned has you thinking about in terms of the generational wealth you were born into versus the generational wealth you would like to build. So take a moment, and when you can type that in the chat group. So I'm going to move on. So with all of that being said, I really want to zero in on how you actually build wealth in layman's terms. So we're going to take a step back and talk about the steps you have the ability to do today to build wealth, no matter where your finances are.
And I'll chime in there. And I think the majority of us can honestly say that our parents did the best that they could with what they had at that point in time. And I think that comes from a monetary standpoint in terms of what they're able to leave us in terms of the generation to generations, but also the information that they had also based on the lack of information. And I think right now we're at an interesting time within this time itself, in the sense that we've got the internet and we're able to search, and there's not really a lot of barriers now between information and ourselves. So and I think just to be as understanding and as in terms of just taking that initiative that we have to do, and not to be complacent just with what we may think is a comfortable zone. But I think we have to just be open to learning and not just taking in money as much as we can all the time, because there's more to life than just money, but money gives you access. And for those people who are coming thereafter, I think that access is obviously going to be critical for us to be able to just scale up our ability to just compete within this very competitive world.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Money is access. And that goes back to what I stated earlier, really understanding that the society that we live in. We live in a capitalistic society, and a capitalistic society is driven by money. So we can't avoid it, unfortunately, unless we go back to, trade, essentially, barter system. But we don't live in that society. We live in a society where cash rules everything,
Around me.
So, the song Cream. So, as you can see, the ultimate goal is to reach the building wealth stage, where you're in a position to actively grow your legacy through a consistent cycle of scheduled undeading, saving, growing through investing and securing your wealth by documenting your legacy. I can't stress that enough. But how do
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I forgot.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to share some of the comments in the chat.
Okay.
So Cher said she agrees in terms of ownership being important, as well as thinking of financially securing future generations beyond our children. So just like the video said, not just thinking about, day to day or month to month, but, that next generation and building a future for those individuals who are going to be coming, well after ourselves. Mm-hmm. And Sean also shared that he would like to build wealth. He started out in a position of debt as a family. And I'm just wanting to course correct that for the future generations to come.
Absolutely. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why we're learning as much as we can, so we can build something that's sustainable for the next generation. So I'm going to tap into that a little bit, and I'm going to talk about like how you can start building, no matter where you are. The idea, and I'm going to give you access to the worksheet. Victoria, I would like for you to put in the chat group development.org/ I don't want to do mindset because that's the electronic version of this thing. You could put it in the chat group, but I want to send out the worksheet. So it would be / worksheet. It covers the percentages. So the range that the person falls in. So if you can type that in the chat group, www.development.org / worksheet. So everyone has access to that PDF.
And I think, this information is, again, critical for us to be able to share to some of these young people, obviously, that we may have in our lives. So I see that there's educators here that I recognize here in the Zoom room. There's people of the clergy, and there's pastors and whatnot. And I think this is where now, whenever you have an audience, that we need to be mindful and intentional to sharing this information, because again, it is not readily available. And again, if each person could teach somebody or reach somebody and share this information, it'll automatically reverberate, through our communities, and it'll give us a better way to just obviously increase that intergenerational wealth.
Absolutely. And I want to say this as well. Don't hesitate to reach out to us at Development, because we do have a programs administrator that is willing to really go out into the community virtually, of course, because we're in New Jersey, to present. But we've been trying this whole hybrid model where people are in they find a community space that they go to, and then they have our team present to them these topics. So we're definitely here. Reach out to us and let us know if you're interested in something like that. So first things first, I'm going to jump into how do you save? How do you stack up? So the first, as per step one, the first thing you have to do is to reflect on your current saving habits. Every month, and these are suggestions. Every month we ask that you we actually do this every single day. Write down the minimum amount of money you come across every month, and then write down how much money you usually save. If you don't save at all, that's fine. You can put 0. It's perfectly fine. The point of this exercise is to make you aware of your saving habits. If you are not saving, you need to see that on paper in order to, realize that you're not saving, in order to change that behavior. And lastly, what you do with your money. What do you do with your money? Do you save? Why or why aren't you saving? For example, do you spend it on like credit card bills? If so, what are you using your credit cards for? You know, so you have to question yourself, and you need to put these things down. As you can see, saving successfully requires a reflective, disciplined mindset. You know, but how do you turn your savings into wealth? You know, and that's the continuous conversation that we're going to have. You know, I really want you guys to really take a look at that worksheet. I know we're pressed for time, so I want you to take a hard look at that worksheet once you're offline and really reflect and put your goals and you, I want you to reflect on yourself. So ideally now, you know, once you fill out that worksheet, you develop the habits needed to become a saver. It's one thing, you know, but how do you actually transform your savings into wealth is another. It requires you to develop a wealth building mindset. I know this conversation has come up over and over again. Everyone is saying like, it's a mindset thing, it's a mindset thing. And this is where we're going to tap into your mindset. This brings us to part 2 of this worksheet. How can you develop a wealth building mindset? Well, the first thing you have to do is have a conversation with yourself. Ask yourself the following questions. What is the first thing that comes to mind when I think of saving? You know, maybe you think, where do I start? Or what a waste of time. Or I love saving, but I want to learn how to save more. Or I need to start doing that. You know, is your saving thought process positive or negative, proactive or passive? These are questions that you have to ask yourself. Now we're going to move on to step 2, understanding that you cannot save without discipline and that you cannot invest without saving. You know, now I know that might sound obvious, especially based on all that we went through over the survey results explanation portion of this workshop. But understanding these fundamentals are often the hardest part for people. We all wish that we could spend as much as we want and magically still have money in the bank. But saving does not work like that, you know, and it is important for you guys to shift your thinking so that we can live in a way that reflects that we understand those basic basic understanding. We don't have all the money in the world, so we have to make sacrifices. So take time to analyze those 2 African proverbs, and you can see them on the screen. One cannot both feast and become rich. And if you have time, you can put it in the chat group. Your analysis of that first proverb, African proverb, one cannot feast and become rich. And the second proverb, if 10 cents does not go out, it does not bring in $1,000. You know, I want you guys to think about that as you get into that mindset of wealth building.
And it's interesting in that last one, Peter, that we talk about 10 cents. So a couple colleagues of mine from the city of Toronto here, where we are, we're saying like within the greater Toronto area, there's about 600,000 people who identify as Black within the greater Toronto area. So if a third of those were to put 10 cents a day together, which is like 200,000 people technically, right?
Yeah.
10 cents a day. And over the course of a year, we would be able to collectively raise $7.3 million, which can go a long way. And that's just 10 cents a day, which is $36 a month. Sorry, a year.
Yeah.
$36.50 a year, right? At 10 cents a day. So, I mean, there's so much we can do collectively in terms of saving, and obviously, you know, that $7.3 million can definitely buy a school where we can learn and pay the teachers where we can learn, just from an Afrocentric and from a caring perspective, where, you know, where we can learn financial literacy and intergenerational wealth and be situated in a position to have care and consideration for our community, right? But again, it's just to put it out there and to have the audacity to try something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all takes mindset, you know, like you said, if we as a people collectively came together as a community and said, let's do this. You know, it's all about succincting all of the minds so we can actually push things forward. And, you know, it's something as easy as that that can change, make a huge difference, a huge difference. Now, you know, like arguably the most important step in developing the wealth building mindset is step 3, acting as if it's impossible to fail. You know, going back to your point, Roderick, you know, like we have to act as if it's impossible to fail. So even in that idea of like banding together the community and saying like, we're going to put $36 a year and we're going to have this money to build this school or set out a goal. Same concept. This requires you to make a personal decision and commitment to yourself to not only believe in yourself, but also believe in what you want to accomplish. Believe that not getting everything you hope for along the way does not equate to failure. And believing that traditional advice is usually irrelevant when it comes to pursuing a non-traditional path. So, you know, when you say, oh, I'm sacrificing this time, I'm not going to brunch with you. So if I like, you know, sometimes, you know, people are going to brunch parties and they spend money going to brunch. You have to make that personal sacrifice to yourself and say, you know what, I can go to brunch, but I'm not buying anything, you know, and you say that to your friends, you have to make that's a personal decision that you have to make moving forward, just to give you an example. So think about it, you know, like most people are not making strides towards building their own wealth, let alone building generational wealth. This means that, believe it or not, the average person may discourage you from making the sacrifices you need to make in order to reach your wealth building goals. So going back to that example that I gave you, it is therefore important for you to all fill your mind with the spirit of information, people, and places that reinforce the wealth building mentality. Some things that you can do to reinforce the wealth building mentality or mindset include identifying books that speak to your specific needs around building wealth, and be sure to read them. You know, I can't stress that literacy is very important. You know, learn as much as you can, especially around building generational wealth. Connecting with like-minded people who are passionate about building wealth through relevant events and groups. I commend everyone for coming to this event. You know, this lets us know that people have a desire and yearn to learn more, which is awesome. And then make sure you spend your time in places that foster the wealth building mindset, as opposed to the spending mindset. You know, put yourself in the arena where everyone is thinking the same. Like, okay, how can we do this? You know, like I know I spoke to some of our students. They formed an investment group. You know, so you know they talk about like what's up and coming, what's IPO is about to drop, you know, and, you know, like they talk about those things. So surround yourself around those people.
Correct.
And then, and lastly, step 3, like I said, it's acting as if, you know, it's impossible to fail. As you build wealth, we hope that you remember this worksheet and the fundamentals of what it takes to build a strong generational wealth mindset. You know, so reflect on that worksheet, look back at it, and you know, and if you have any questions, really reach out to those experts that are out there. You know, we all have Google. You know, so there's no excuse. You know, if you're looking for some type of information, it can be found on the internet. It is there, and it will lead you in the right direction. But if the internet isn't your forte, or you don't like the internet itself, you will find the person that you can actually call if you want that in-person thing. So utilize the internet to your advantage.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of the session. I want to open up the floor for questions. You know, of course, Roderick, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer. I ask everyone, I urge everyone to, if you have questions outside of this conversation, please email us. And I can't stress to you enough to follow us on social media. We're on every single platform, even TikTok, which is not up here. So, you know, follow us. we have to tap into the younger generation, which is on TikTok, and, you know, like really, you know, just look at what we do and reach out to us if you want us to come and speak to you guys about all of the wonderful work that we're doing. So Roderick, I'm just opening up the floor and you can take it, and I'm here to really answer any questions that are.
Yeah, I just wanted just to note that that last slide that you had up, I believe, from the Ashanti people. One of the things that I believe we have to start with is re-engineering, how we look at wealth. And so many of us are caught up with the symbols of wealth. So I just heard yesterday, like a friend of mine whose grandson is in the hip hop game, and we always hear these things, but he just got $200,000 from a company, and the first thing that he went out and did is bought a Benz for 80,000, and he spent 50,000 on a chain and a pennant. So I mean, it leaves him with $70,000 now, right? And I think the delayed gratification in which we need to just now impart within our mindset is something that we're going to be going against the grain from what society says is what to do. Because again, when you turn on social media or turn on the television, it's all these symbols of wealth that are coming upon us and pretty much shaping our minds. But we definitely need to see how that money is going to work for us. And obviously, as you were talking about initially, investments and just being able to diversify our portfolios is from what has worked for people who have attained wealth is the arenas that we need to play in. And I think that can only come by just understanding what has gone wrong or what hasn't worked, and obviously looking and researching what has worked and applying it, and not just talking about it, but being about it.
Absolutely. And it all goes back to, like I said to you before, and what we discussed and everyone is aware of is mindset. It takes us to just really shift our mindset to really think of the future in a way where it's very positive, and to piggyback off of what you said, like there are a million stories out there about this younger generation really coming into riches and really not knowing what to do with the money itself. And that all goes back to really the conversations that they're having at home and then in the community, revolving around building wealth and looking towards the future and what you should invest in, and as opposed to, something that is materialistic and quite frankly depreciates in value as soon as you buy it, understanding those concepts. Yeah, I mean, it takes conversations like this and really creating programs for the next generation to really learn this, not only in high school, but in elementary school. So as they're moving through every stage in life, they are aware of these barriers or these, like these falsehoods or these outlets in which, they don't have a solid end. The ending is usually negative or damaging to the person instead of something being a positive outcome at the end, and especially for the next generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, even when we look at, our children who are in elementary school, and if there's any way that we can start to teach them to save collectively and even invest collectively when they're young, it'll put them into the mindset of this is how it works, and seeing how as a community, again, we can invest and benefit and watch it grow and being a part of it, right? So we say in the work that I do, before you buy in, you have to be able to weigh in. And allowing people to make minimal or nominal investment, like that 10 cents a day, right? It's feasible and it's viable. And again, with the numbers, we can definitely do, some, I don't want to say damage, but we can definitely do some, have that buying power where we're able to, do something and see it grow.
Yeah, absolutely. It only takes a spark.
Correct.
To set the fire ablaze. So the force ablaze. So it just requires, I can't stress enough, going back to the mindset, really getting people to collectively say, we're going to do this, and it can be done.
Absolutely. And I think, the influential people that we have in our community, like obviously some of the entertainers, some of the athletes, and then obviously some of those like pop culture icons, right? Basically, are instrumental in terms of helping us set the pace because you know we don't a lot of us follow or you know just basically drink quote unquote the Kool-Aid without even thinking about what's in the Kool-Aid. So if there's positive role modeling and there's positive conversations about building this intergenerational wealth, you know, people will get on board just by default. And I think that's ultimately, you know, the responsibility of people of power to set this trend so that we can break some of these cycles, not just of poverty, but of, you know, mental and emotional poverty, right?
Absolutely,
And being
absolutely.
emancipated.
That's why I commend Earn Your Leisure, you know, like really tapping into the culture in a sense where, you know, like you have all these people who wear these big chains and have these fly cars, but really shifting the conversation around like, okay, you have all this stuff, but you also are investing, you know, like and really making that the focus instead of the flashy things that the kids see. Because the kids are drawn to the flashy things, but they don't see these individuals talking about financial literacy and their woes and their struggles. They only see the glitz and glamour, which could be confusing for a child growing up. So when they do come across a little bit of money, they just want to spend it on something that's flashy instead of really understanding that that person honestly made some sacrifices before you saw all of that stuff, but that's all you see.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like it's a very deep conversation that needs to be told and had not only with the parents, but it's just intergenerational. It's just like our generation, the generation before that, and then the younger generation. So really tapping into all of them so everyone is on the same page and has the same concept moving forward. I'm not saying it's very easy to do it, but you know, with any and everything, it's not going to happen overnight. But it definitely takes someone to really take the initiative to do it or start, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah, so people in the chat are definitely saying it was a great and insightful session, and thank you very much to Peter and the BBPA for putting this on. Other people are asking about where they can invest this 10 cents a day practice in terms of group economics. And just to say that the BBPA is looking at something along these lines in days to come. So we'll definitely keep you posted. And just in terms of where technology is now, obviously with the transparency and everything else, you know, it could be definitely done in a very safe and accountable way. So that, you know, again, we can, you know, grow as a community and just be a part of this process. Someone also said, excellent presentation, Peter, and thank you. And yeah, we definitely wanted to say on behalf of the BBPA, thank you very much, Peter Gillo and development.org in terms of the information that you brought forward today. And definitely we are looking forward to the next 2 weeks where we're going to extend this conversation and understand more about building Black intergenerational wealth so that our people who are going to be following us, our generations to follow, can thank us in terms of taking these steps to prepare a future for them so that they wouldn't necessarily have to go through some of the trials and tribulations or hardships that, you know, our ancestors prior to us or predecessors have had to endure. So again, thank you very much, Peter, for all the information that you brought to us today.
Thank you. And hopefully you guys can join us next week. I would love to see everyone again next week, as Roderick stated. You know, this is an ongoing series. So next Saturday and the following Saturday, I look forward to seeing your faces again. Thank you.
Okay. And just before we go, somebody asked if we're going to be talking about AAP and next comment space. I'm not too sure exactly what that acronym AAP is, but if you wanted to spell that out for us, Francis, that'd be great. Oh, ask a professional. Yes, thank you very much. So yes, every Wednesday at 12 o'clock p.m. we have Ask a Professional, and information just like what Peter shared today. We have different professionals on for an hour every Wednesday afternoon at 12 o'clock p.m. So tap into the BBPA and get more information. And there's a lot of programs here at the BBPA that are going to be starting up in the month of February. So definitely stay tuned. Join us on our website to get more information. And the BBPA is here for the Black community. We are 40 years strong, and we're not going anywhere besides the top. And we just wanted to thank all of our sponsors today, the Donald Reed Estate and RBC, and obviously the BBPA and all of the staff that make all of these programs happen. So we're thanking you, and we will definitely see you next week, same time, same place, right here on Community Space, the financial literacy program that speaks the language of the community. Take care, stay safe.
Thank you.
Community Spaces, the financial literacy program that speaks and reaches the community. Are we going to be in a better place, or are we going to be still, quote unquote, behind the 8 ball?
Because of the historical disadvantage that our community has, we most times do not have financial role models. Without that, economically and financially speaking, we'll always be at the bottom.
Keep proper books and record, because the data drives the strategy, and the strategy drives the profits.
COVID-19 sort of removed a veil. It's really exposed the structural barriers that our communities face.
These last 2 years, where there's been a heightened emphasis on the well-being of Black people, has influenced the influx of funds and opportunities. The time is now. How long is that window going to be open?
We'll see you next week, and don't forget to tell a friend to join us here on Community Space.